So this is the reason I bought the Panasonic S9. Yes, this is an old school film camera lens, but that is precisely why I got this camera, because on that full frame sensor that the Lumix S9 has, I can adapt this LTM lens from my rangefinder camera and use it the way I would use it on a film camera. Is it going to be the same exact experience? Well, I was hoping so, but obviously it's not. There's a couple key differences that we got to talk about, but the good things first. This lens produces incredible image quality on modern digital camera sensors. The sensor captures every single fantastic detail and bit of character that this lens has. Look at these images right here. All that fantastic swirly bokeh and lack of clinical sharpness and just the rendition of the colors, all of that is captured perfectly by this modern camera sensor. The Lumix S9 is a very small camera with a giant full frame sensor, and it's the perfect kind of combination of size and portability with full capability, especially with these old school lenses. Modern lenses on the Lumix cameras are going to be extremely sharp, extremely clinical. You're going to see every single little bit of detail, and a lot of people want that, and that's totally fair. But what I want is not exactly that. Additionally, I really enjoy using these little lenses. They're very small, which keeps the camera profile overall very small, and they're tactile, they're mechanical, they're kind of something you have to deal with manual focus. All of that makes it fun to use compared to a modern lens, which usually has autofocus or doesn't have mechanical manual focusing, which is something I think every camera should have at some point. So am I getting the images that I want? Absolutely. However, the experience of using the lens is not as amazing as I was hoping. And the main reason is that the Lumix S9 does not have a viewfinder. I knew this before buying the camera, and I decided that it was not a deal breaker, and it definitely still isn't a deal breaker for me. But when I want to focus with this lens, I have to use the screen to focus and using the focus peaking settings on the camera in order to see what I'm focusing on. Especially when I'm shooting at f2.0, that depth of field is very, very minimal, and therefore I need the guidance of the camera to help me focus. And unfortunately, that means I have to look at the screen, click a button to get the focus peaking up on the screen. And then if I'm not focusing on exactly where the little display is on the screen, I gotta move it to some part of the image where I wanna get my focus. And then I can turn the knobs on this lens and actually focus. You can't see the camera right now because it's actually recording this video, but I've got a couple clips here so you can see exactly what this could look like. So I'm getting the utility of this lens. I'm getting the images that I want. I'm getting the character. I'm getting kind of the output that I want from this lens. But using it is not as seamless and it's not as kind of easy as I was hoping it would be, even though I knew this camera didn't have a viewfinder. And this camera will never have a viewfinder because it's got a cold shoe up top and therefore you can't adapt anything to it. So it's a pretty meaningful limitation that you need to be aware of if you're looking to use this camera the way I am, using these vintage lenses. But overall, I don't mind that. It actually opens up a couple interesting options when I use it that way. I can actually be a bit more stealthy now because I'm using the screen on the camera. So I can basically just kind of stand around my subject, look down at the screen a little bit, mess around with the focusing because the focus peaking display pops up on the screen, and it's actually kind of big, so it works decently well. And while you're doing all of that, it doesn't look like you're taking a photo. It just looks like you're messing around with your camera, and the average subject isn't going to pay any mind to that. But if I had brought the camera up to my face in the direction of my subject, it'd be very obvious what I was doing. And I don't do tons of candid street photography, but it still is something useful that I like to have in my back pocket, especially for certain types of images. So having this new capability is actually very useful. It's this interesting kind of blend between the digital and the analog. And in those cases, it works very, very well. But in other cases where I'm talking to my subject and engaging, and it's very clear that we're about to do a photo transaction, if you want to call it that, there's the extra step of having to press focus peaking on the camera and then focus, and all those extra seconds potentially could be annoying and take away from the experience. Whereas if I had a viewfinder, I could just put the camera right up to my eye, immediately start to focus, and boom, take my images. So it's kind of a bit of give and take. It's not perfect in either direction, but if it works for you, then I think you should definitely consider that camera. The Lumix S9 has a 24 megapixel photography sensor, which is more than enough for modern standards. The image quality is amazing, and it's the same sensor that you've got in the S5 II, S5 IIX. On the video side, which is actually the main reason I bought the camera, you've got incredible 6K quality image with fantastic dynamic range, just kind of all the bells and whistles from a specs perspective when it comes to the image quality. This camera does not operate like a Cine camera. It doesn't have all these extra buttons and all these settings. which for some people might be a huge miss and for others might be a huge positive. That's up to you to decide. But the capability of the image on the video and on the photo side is there. And that combination is exactly what I needed as a creator. So for me, it's a perfect fit. This has a mechanical shutter, which for photography, for my purposes, doesn't really make a difference. So I'm not shooting fast moving subjects. And for studio work, which I do some studio work, I can't use this camera unless I'm using a constant light, which actually I prefer to do with film anyways, although that's not a film camera, but I typically like to do it anyways because I can see and visualize my image immediately without having to set up the flash and change settings and all of that. So it really depends on what your use case is. So the camera is definitely not for everybody, but is it capable of producing fantastic images? 100%. Basically every camera nowadays is, but this camera is no exception. But when you combine it with these film lenses, it's a small package, it's extremely capable, and it just, works fairly well if you can get over using the screen. So that's the biggest gripe that I have with the camera. The other big reason why I was interested in this camera as a film photographer is that this camera has a built-in software for you to create presets. So the same way the Fuji system has all like the film simulations, you can create your own here. And it's a lot of fun to use that because then I don't have to go into Lightroom after the fact and edit raw photos and do all this stuff. Something I really like about film is that when I scan my film, the film is giving me a lot of characteristics right off the bat. Obviously, there's choices I need to make in terms of scanning, in terms of which way I want to take the color and that kind of thing. But every film stock has its kind of its own unique characteristic. So you can kind of replicate some of that by creating these presets on the camera. And then when you shoot the images, you basically immediately apply the filter and now your photo is edited. You don't have to think about anything. And you can set things to be automatic so that every time you shoot, the preset's already applied. You don't even think about it. And that's really cool. And of course, you do have the raw file as a backup in case you want to take things in a completely different direction later on. So it's a really interesting kind of capability that a lot of cameras do not have right now, digital cameras specifically. The software is not that great though, I'll be honest with you. It's kind of a pain in the ass to use from my perspective. It's not seamless, it's not intuitive. It's just not my ideal software, but it's there, and once you set it up and you don't have to touch anything too much, there it works fantastic because now your photos are just getting this look. So if you want to have different styles of black and white, for example, the way you would have with different film stocks, you can do that here pretty easily after you've already messed with the software and created the presets. So that 1-2 punch for me is huge. Having something I can adapt old school lenses to in a very small form factor and have incredible image quality on both video and photography side, that's massive. And then the film simulations, as I said, they're very useful, something I need to kind of play with a lot more. But I'm loving the results I'm getting so far on both video and photography. So if you're interested in this camera and you're a film shooter like me, this might be a pretty compelling package, honestly, because it's very small and lets you use these lenses very easily while giving you the full image capability of that sensor. Lets these lenses shine. It really shows you what the characteristics of these lenses are. Because you have that modern sensor capturing everything that comes through here. So yeah, that's about it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Anybody bought this camera and actually enjoy using it? Extremely polarizing camera, I know, but it's obviously not for everybody, and that's totally fine. Honestly, cameras should be made that way, where they're not for everybody. They specialize in certain things. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you think, and of course, please like and subscribe to the channel. All right, y'all. Peace.